The silence in the house was a heavy blanket, thicker than any winter snow. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the presence of an absence, a gaping hole where laughter and footsteps used to be. My wife, Maria, had been gone for 6 months, but her scent, a light mix of lavender and old books, still clung to the curtains, the worn armchair, even my own clothes. I'd retreated to our secluded home in the United States, a place we'd dreamed of filling with future memories, now just a monument to what was lost. Every morning, the chill in the air felt deeper, not just from the season, but from a coldness inside me. The old floorboards creaked under my weight, each groan a mournful echo in the vast emptiness. I moved through the days like a ghost, a shadow in my own life. Food tasted like ash, colors seemed muted, and the world outside felt distant, unreal. There was no point to anything anymore. No joy, no drive, just a dull, persistent ache that settled deep in my bones. I was adrift, a boat without a rudder, lost on an ocean of grief. Sometimes, though, when I was alone in the quiet, I'd catch things. Fleeting visual disturbances, like a ripple in the corner of my eye that vanished when I turned my head. Peripheral glimpses of shapes I couldn't quite place. Too quick, too vague, and the whispers. Faint, distant, like the wind playing tricks, but they always seemed to carry a hint of my name. A soft, almost urgent sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I'd shake my head, put it down to exhaustion, to a mind playing tricks on itself under the weight of sorrow. It was easier to believe I was losing it than to think something else was happening. One afternoon, sitting in Maria's garden, a place she had poured so much love into, a tiny hummingbird hovered right in front of me. It wasn't unusual to see them, but this one stayed, its wings a blur, its tiny black eyes fixed on mine. Just as I was thinking of Maria, of how much she loved these little jewels, the hummingbird let out a specific trill, a particular sequence of notes I had only ever heard from one type of bird, a rare blue-throated mountain gem that Maria had once pointed out on a hike. It was a sound I associated only with her. The bird darted away, and I felt a strange warmth, a flicker of something almost like hope, a momentary connection to something beyond my sorrow. But then I scoffed at myself. Coincidence? Just a coincidence. My mind was grasping at straws, trying to find meaning where there was none. Then the dream started. Not nightmares, not scary, but intensely real. Maria was there, vibrant and alive, just as I remembered her. I could feel her touch, the gentle brush of her hand on my arm. I could hear her voice, clear as a bell, speaking my name, saying things we used to say. The warmth of her presence was so strong, I'd wake up reaching for her, only to find the empty space beside me. It was like living the loss all over again every morning. But in these dreams, she always had an urgent look on her face, her eyes wide, trying to tell me something. The message was never clear. It was always shrouded in symbolic images. A winding path, a flickering candle, a calendar page turning rapidly. I'd wake up with a feeling of unease, a sense of something important just out of reach. The world outside the house, Maria's garden, even the woods nearby, seemed to be shifting too. The sunsets were unnaturally vibrant, bleeding across the sky in colors I'd never seen before, hues of purple and fiery orange that felt almost electric. The animals acted strangely. Flocks of birds would suddenly take flight in odd, swirling patterns as if guided by an invisible hand. Deer, usually skittish and quick to flee, would appear near the house, standing still, looking at me with an almost knowing gaze, unafraid. Plants in Maria's garden, typically dormant for the season, would sprout new buds, some even blooming out of season, their petals a startling splash of color against the muted landscape. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also unsettling. A growing unease settled over me, a feeling that the world around me was subtly out of sync, mirroring the disquiet in my own heart. Then came the numbers. They started subtly. 11:11 on the clock when I happened to glance at it. Then again and again. I'd dismiss it, a trick of the mind. But then I'd see it on a receipt, the total exactly 11.11. Or a license plate with a sequence of 333, then another car a few minutes later with 333 again. Flipping through an old book, my finger would land on page 444. It happened too often to be random. At first I ignored them, but as they multiplied, they created a strange sensation. It felt like I was being watched or guided, like someone or something was trying to communicate with me through these numerical patterns. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible nudge, but it began to chip away at my skepticism. A growing sense of destiny, quiet and insistent, started to take root in the desolate landscape of my grief. I had no idea what it meant, but it was there, a persistent hum beneath the silence. The subtle signs, the birdsong, the dreams and the numbers, they all started to get louder, clearer, more impossible to ignore. The quiet whispers I'd sometimes catch, just at the edge of hearing, they weren't so quiet anymore. Now, I could make out fragments of words, always carrying a sense of urgency, like someone was trying to shout through a thick wall. Sometimes, I'd hear the delicate chime of Maria's wind chimes, the ones she loved so much, but there wouldn't be a breath of wind outside. It was unsettling, like the air itself was shifting around me. Visually, things were getting weirder too. Fleeting shadows danced in my peripheral vision, just beyond what I could focus on. I'd turn my head quickly, but there would be nothing there. Sometimes the light in a room would shimmer, almost like heat rising from asphalt, but indoors. Objects would subtly shift on my desk. A pen moving an inch or two. A book slightly ajar when I knew I'd closed it tight. It was enough to make me question my own sanity, but it happened too often to be just my imagination. Then came the physical sensations. Sudden cold spots would appear in a room, making the hairs on my arms stand up. Even when the rest of the house was warm, I'd feel an inexplicable tingling on my skin, like a faint electrical current, or sometimes even a light, fleeting touch, as if someone had brushed past me. It was never aggressive, just present, like I wasn't alone anymore. My dreams, which had been a mix of comfort and confusion, became much more direct. Maria was no longer just a vivid memory. Her presence in these dreams was stronger, almost solid. Her voice, once just a whisper, became clearer, more insistent. She wasn't just showing me symbols anymore. She was actively trying to warn me. I could sense her trying to tell me about a coming event, a crucial understanding I needed to grasp. Something important looming on the horizon. The urgency in her dream eyes was palpable. It filled me with a profound sense of longing, a desperate ache to hold her, compounded by a growing apprehension about what she was trying to convey. I felt a desperate need to understand her message, believing it to be my last true connection to her, a final act of love from beyond. The coincidences, which I had initially dismissed, now started forming undeniable patterns. They weren't random anymore. They felt orchestrated. I'd be walking down the street, lost in thought about Maria and these strange occurrences, and a complete stranger would pass by, mumbling a phrase that directly echoed something from my dreams or my thoughts. Once, I was looking for a specific book on ancient prophecies in my cluttered study, something I hadn't touched in years, and it practically fell off the shelf onto my lap, open to a page discussing celestial alignments and cycles. Another time, I was thinking about a particular symbol Maria had shown me in a dream, and later that day, I saw it etched into an old piece of jewelry in a dusty antique shop window that I'd never noticed before. It was like the universe itself was speaking to me, guiding me, pushing me along a specific path. This shift from random occurrences to undeniable patterns was a turning point. I stopped dismissing these events as coincidence or a grieving mind playing tricks on me. I started to accept that something extraordinary was happening, something beyond my previous understanding of the world. It felt like I was part of a larger, unfolding narrative, a story that was slowly revealing itself, and I was a character in it, whether I liked it or not. Driven by this new conviction and a desperate need for answers, I began researching these phenomena. I spent hours online, poring over old books I'd bought years ago and forgotten about. I delved into topics I would have scoffed at before: spirituality, parapsychology, ancient prophecies, even quantum physics. I looked for anything that could explain what was happening to me, anything that could give context to Maria's urgent dream warnings and the strange patterns appearing in my life. I read about collective consciousness, synchronicity, near-death experiences, and theories of parallel realities. The more I read, the more I felt a growing conviction. These events were not random. They were interconnected, weaving together into a complex tapestry that pointed towards a significant, impending revelation. It was like I was slowly piecing together a puzzle, and each new piece clicked into place with an unsettling sense of rightness. As I dug deeper, a pervasive sense of dread began to settle in. It wasn't a fear of death after losing Maria. That fear had largely faded. This was different. It was a fear of the unknown, of a truth that could shatter my understanding of reality, a truth so profound it might change everything. It manifested physically as a constant knot in my stomach, a persistent unease that made it difficult to eat or sleep properly. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, constantly scanning, listening, feeling for the next sign, the next message. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, a monumental discovery awaiting me. It was a destiny I couldn't escape, a path I was being inexorably drawn down, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my life, and perhaps much more, was about to change forever. I just had no idea how. The world around me, once a quiet backdrop to my grief, started to actively participate in my unraveling. My perception of reality began to blur, not in a confusing way, but like a veil was slowly being lifted, revealing layers I hadn't known existed. I started hearing faint, overlapping sounds that didn't belong to my immediate environment. Sometimes it was like distant chimes, soft and melodic, almost too beautiful to be real. Other times, it was ethereal music, a melody I couldn't place that seemed to drift in and out of hearing. And then there were murmurs, like conversations happening far away in a language I didn't understand but somehow felt important. It was never loud enough to be intrusive, but always there, a subtle hum beneath the surface of everyday noise. Visually, things were also shifting. The air around me would occasionally shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt on a summer day, but without any heat source. Colors seemed more vibrant at times, almost painfully so, or sometimes distorted, like looking through rippling water. I started catching fleeting glimpses of impossible geometries in my peripheral vision, patterns that made no sense, shapes that defied logic. They would appear for a split second, intricate and complex, only to vanish the moment I tried to focus directly on them. Sometimes, I'd see fleeting figures, like shadows moving too fast, just at the edge of my sight, gone before I could properly register them. It was like living in a painting that was constantly being retouched by an unseen artist. Physically, I experienced episodes of intense vertigo, a feeling of the room spinning or tilting, even when I was perfectly still. There were moments where I felt a disorienting sensation of falling, a sudden drop in my stomach, only to find myself firmly rooted to the spot. It was unsettling, making me question my own senses, but it was also consistent enough that I couldn't simply write it off as a medical issue. Maria's presence, which had been growing stronger in my dreams, now became almost tangible, even in my waking moments. I would be sitting alone, and for a fleeting second, I would feel the ghost of her hand on my shoulder, a familiar warmth that would quickly fade. Her voice, once confined to the clarity of my dreams, would occasionally whisper faintly in the silence of the house. A soft sound that seemed to come from just behind me, always carrying a sense of urgency. In my dreams, her message became even more explicit. She wasn't just warning me, she was actively trying to show me things. I saw symbols, not unlike the geometric patterns I was glimpsing in my waking hours. There were diagrams that pulsed with light and even brief, unsettling visions of future events, like snapshots of a world I didn't recognize. The common thread in all these dream communications was time and choice. Her message was still fragmented, like trying to catch mist, but it carried an immense weight, a gravity that seeped into my waking hours. It was a profound sense of being guided. Yes, but also burdened by the weight of an impending truth. My deep loneliness, which had been a constant companion since her death, was now intertwined with a sense of cosmic connection, as if Maria was bridging the gap between my world and something far greater. The synchronicities, which had previously seemed like mere patterns, now directly led me to specific information or locations. It was no longer just a book falling open. It was the rewrite book, opening to the exact page I needed to see. I'd be thinking about a specific concept, and then a news report would catch my eye, echoing my thoughts or my dreams with uncanny precision. A chance encounter with someone, a stranger in a coffee shop, or a fleeting conversation at the grocery store, would result in them uttering a key phrase, a piece of information I needed to hear, something that directly connected to the puzzle I was trying to solve. It felt less like coincidence and more like an invisible hand was pushing me, steering me, ensuring I stayed on a predetermined path. I was no longer just observing. I was being actively pulled along, an actor in a play whose script was being written as I went. The repeating numbers, which had started as an oddity, began to reveal a deeper meaning. I started to see them not just as signs, but as codes or coordinates. I spent hours trying to decipher them, experimenting with basic numerology, looking for patterns, trying to connect them to dates, locations, or even concepts. Sometimes the numbers would align with a specific date in history, a significant astronomical event, or a passage from an ancient text I was reading. It wasn't always clear, but the feeling was there. These numbers were a secret language, slowly being revealed to me, hinting at an ancient knowledge that was now becoming accessible. A growing sense of prophecy started to settle in me. I began to internalize the idea that I was part of something far greater than myself. My personal grief, which had consumed me for so long, started to merge with a larger, universal concern. It was no longer just about Maria. It was about something much bigger, something that involved all of us. I felt a sense of responsibility, a dawning awareness that my journey was tied to a significant event, a pivotal moment in time. The atmosphere around me became charged with an almost electric energy, a constant hum of anticipation. It was a feeling of destiny unfolding, a quiet certainty that I was being prepared for something monumental, something that would change not just my life, but perhaps the very fabric of reality itself. The veil, it seemed, was thinning, and I was beginning to see through it. The subtle shifts that had been building for months finally culminated in a profound, undeniable alteration of my immediate reality. It wasn't a gradual change anymore. It was an explosion of perception, a complete rewiring of how I experienced the world around me. The air in my study, a room that had always felt safe and familiar, began to shimmer intensely. It wasn't just a heat haze. It was like looking through disturbed water, distorting the light, twisting the familiar contours of my bookshelves and furniture into something fluid and strange. The distortion started small, at the edges of my vision, but soon it grew, swirling inward, creating a vortex-like effect right in the center of the room. Colors became supernaturally vibrant, almost painfully so. Reds burning with an inner fire, blues deepening into an impossible saturation. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. The whispers, which had been faint and disembodied, now coalesced into a resonant hum. It wasn't a sound I heard with my ears alone. It vibrated through my bones, a deep, pulsating rhythm that filled the space, vibrating the very air around me. This hum was accompanied by a high-pitched, almost musical frequency, like the ringing of 1,000 tiny bells, but somehow harmonious, not jarring. It was a symphony of the unseen, overwhelming my senses, drowning out all other sound. A powerful pressure built in the air, making it difficult to breathe, as if the atmosphere itself was thickening, becoming denser. My body tingled intensely, every nerve ending alive and buzzing. My heart raced in my chest, a frantic drum against my ribs. I felt a sensation of being pulled or stretched, as if my very form was being elongated, reshaped by an unseen force. It was exhilarating and terrifying, a moment where my rational mind screamed for an explanation, but my deeper self simply surrendered to the unfolding impossible. Then, from the swirling, shimmering light, a gateway materialized before me. It wasn't a solid object, not a door or a window, but an aperture, a swirling vortex of light and energy. It was ethereal, yet undeniably present. The portal was composed of iridescent light, shifting through all the colors I had just witnessed, and then some I couldn't even name. Complex, geometric patterns formed and dissolved within its depths, seeming to defy earthly physics, constantly rearranging themselves in a silent dance. It pulsed with an inner light, like a beating heart, drawing me in. A mixture of awe and terror gripped me, a primal fear of the unknown, yet an undeniable pull towards it. It was a profound sense of recognition, as if I had always known this moment would come, as if this shimmering gateway was a destination I had been unconsciously seeking my entire life. My breath hitched in my throat, my eyes wide, unable to look away from the spectacle that defied every law of nature I understood. From within the pulsing heart of the portal, a being began to manifest. It didn't walk out or fly or push its way through. It simply coalesced, forming from the light itself. It wasn't monstrous or frightening in the way I might have imagined an alien. Instead, it was ethereal and luminous, its form slender and impossibly tall. An inner light radiated from it, a soft glow that seemed to emanate wisdom and immense power. Its shape was fluid, shifting slightly, like heat rising from pavement, but it always maintained a graceful, elegant outline. There was a sense of profound peace and immense intelligence about it. Its eyes were ancient, deep pools of starlight, reflecting untold ages of cosmic observation, holding a depth of knowledge that made my human understanding feel like a fleeting thought. As it solidified, a subtle, sweet scent filled the air, something earthy and clean, like rain on dry soil, but with an otherworldly quality. A warmth emanated from its presence, a comforting heat that replaced the chilling pressure I had felt before. And then a profound silence fell. The resonant hum of the portal, which had been so overwhelming, receded, replaced by an absolute stillness that seemed to absorb all sound, leaving only the soft glow of the entity and the quiet beat of my own heart. The alien communicated not through spoken words, but through a direct, telepathic transfer of pure thought and emotion. It was like a stream of understanding flowing directly into my mind, bypassing the need for language. The initial feeling was one of overwhelming calm, a profound understanding that settled my racing heart. There was a sense of being utterly known and accepted, as if every thought I had ever had, every grief I had ever felt, was seen and understood without judgment. The first message was a confirmation. I had been chosen, guided, and prepared for this encounter. It was a gentle reassurance that my wife, Maria, was indeed attempting to reach me, that her messages in my dreams were not born of my grief-stricken mind alone, but were part of a larger plan. She had been a conduit, a loving guide from beyond, preparing me for this very moment. Through this telepathic link, I experienced a fleeting, overwhelming vision of vast cosmic distances. I saw swirling galaxies, nebulae blooming like impossible flowers, stars being born and dying in magnificent explosions of light and energy. It was the intricate web of existence, all compressed into a single, profound instant, a flash of eternity. I felt incredibly small, a tiny speck in an infinite universe. Yet paradoxically, I felt profoundly connected to everything, a single thread woven into that vast tapestry. My personal grief, which had been my constant companion for so long, momentarily faded, replaced by a sense of universal perspective. My own sorrow seemed insignificant in the face of such grandeur. Yet at the same time, it deepened my connection to this cosmic dance. I understood in that moment that my pain, my love, my very existence were all part of something immeasurably larger and more significant than I could have ever conceived. The universe was alive, and I was a part of its beating heart. The entity then began to convey its core message, the reason for its appearance, and the truth behind the 2030 date that had been subtly hinted at in my dreams, and the repeating numbers. It wasn't an end of the world, it clarified, but an end of a specific timeline or reality construct. It was a convergence point, a moment of profound choice for humanity. The calendar, as we understood it, was a human construct, a way we organized our perception of time. But this particular date, 2030, reflected a deeper cosmic cycle that was now reaching its critical juncture. It was a threshold, not a finish line. The alien's thoughts flowed into mine, explaining that our linear perception of time was a limited way of seeing things. It introduced me to the concept of parallel timelines, like streams flowing side by side and diverging realities. paths that branch off into entirely different futures. The 2030 event, it explained, was a point where these multiple realities, currently running in parallel, would dramatically diverge or converge. The path taken would depend entirely on the collective consciousness of humanity. My mind reeled. Everything I thought I knew about existence, about time, about reality itself, was being completely reevaluated in that instant. It was disorienting, like stepping onto solid ground only to find it was made of water. Yet, despite the shock, there was an undeniable logic to it, a sense that this deeper truth resonated with something ancient in my own being. It made sense of the subtle shifts I had been experiencing, the feeling that the world was somehow out of sync. The aliens stressed that humanity was at a critical juncture, facing a choice between paths leading to vastly different futures. One path, it showed me, led to greater unity, expanded consciousness, and harmony with each other and the universe. It was a future filled with innovation, understanding, and collective well-being. The other path, however, led to deeper division, destruction, and a collapse into a less desirable timeline, one filled with conflict, scarcity, and suffering. My role, it made clear, was not to save humanity. I wasn't a savior. Instead, I was to warn, to awaken, to prepare others for this monumental choice that lay before them. The alien didn't ask me to choose for them, but to make sure they knew a choice was even necessary. It then stressed the power of collective human consciousness in shaping these timelines. Thoughts, emotions, and intentions it conveyed were not just personal. They had cosmic resonance, like ripples spreading across an infinite pond. The importance of awareness, of truly understanding this choice, was the first step. As this concept was conveyed, I felt a surge of universal energy, a connection to every living thing on Earth and beyond. I felt a profound sense of shared responsibility, not just for myself, but for the trajectory of our entire species. It was an overwhelming feeling, a blend of immense power and immense burden. My own grief, which had felt so heavy, now seemed to be part of a larger, more urgent narrative. Then came the disturbing truth, the most unsettling part of the revelation. Many humans, the alien conveyed, were already unwittingly on the path to the undesirable timeline. They were blinded by old paradigms, by fear, by division, by the constant noise of everyday distractions. They were walking towards a future they didn't even realize they were creating, a future they wouldn't want. The difficulty of the task ahead became starkly clear. Convincing others of this truth, of the existence of these diverging timelines, would be incredibly challenging. It would require a fundamental shift in perception, a willingness to see beyond the immediate and embrace a cosmic perspective. I felt a mix of despair at the sheer scale of the challenge, like trying to turn a massive ship with a tiny rudder. How could one man, grieving and ordinary, hope to convey such an impossible truth to billions? Yet, alongside that despair, a fierce determination began to stir within me. It was a commitment born not just of the alien's message, but of my wife's persistent warnings, her final act of love trying to guide me. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I had to try. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us, about the future of humanity. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on me, but it also forged a new resolve, a purpose I never expected. My life had been shattered by loss, but now, in the presence of this impossible being, it was being rebuilt, piece by piece, into something entirely new and profoundly significant. The silence of my home, once a symbol of my grief, now felt like a sacred space where the fate of worlds had been discussed. I was no longer just a widower. I was a messenger, tasked with a truth that could change everything. The world around me started to show cracks, tiny fractures in what I used to think of as solid reality. It was like living in a film where the projector was constantly skipping frames. These weren't grand, apocalyptic events, but small, unsettling glitches that whispered of unstable timelines, just as the alien had described. Sometimes I'd be looking at a book on my shelf, and for a split second it would just vanish. Then it would be right back, sitting perfectly still. Or I'd be walking through my living room, and the colors on the wall would momentarily desaturate, turning everything into a faded photograph, only to snap back to vibrant life an instant later. It was enough to make me question my sanity, but the alien's message had prepared me. I knew what I was seeing. The auditory glitches were even stranger. I'd hear faint, overlapping whispers, like distant conversations from another room. But there was no other room. Fragments of unfamiliar music, a melody I couldn't place, would drift into my hearing, then fade. Sometimes it was just a faint crying sound, so brief and ethereal, I wondered if I had imagined it. It wasn't menacing, just incredibly disorienting. A constant reminder that the fabric of reality was thinner than I had ever believed. Physical sensations joined in too. Moments of profound disorientation would hit me. A sudden feeling of vertigo even when I was sitting still. Déjà vu became a common occurrence. But it wasn't just the feeling of having done something before. It was like a memory of an alternate self. A fleeting glimpse into a path I hadn't taken. And then there were the inexplicable shifts in temperature, sudden cold spots in a warm room, or a wave of heat passing over me for no reason at all. It was all a constant, nagging confirmation that the divergence was happening. Right then, all around me. The entity continued to communicate, not with a constant stream of thoughts, but at crucial moments. Its presence was a quiet hum in the back of my mind, a gentle nudge when I needed it most. It strengthened my resolve, especially when the glitches made me doubt my own mind. It provided further context for what I was experiencing, helping me understand that these sensory distortions were merely the physical manifestations of the timelines beginning to pull apart. It also showed me, telepathically, how my wife's messages, those fragmented warnings and symbolic dreams, had been preparing me for this understanding all along. She hadn't known the full scope, perhaps, but her love had been a beacon, guiding me to this impossible truth. I felt an almost unbearable weight of knowledge, like carrying a secret that could shatter the world. But I also felt a deep, unwavering connection to the alien. It was a benevolent guide, a cosmic teacher, and I trusted its silent wisdom implicitly. It showed me visions, not just of what would happen, but of how it was being made to happen. Human fear, anger, and division, it illustrated, were like fuel poured onto a fire, actively strengthening the undesirable timeline. Every hateful comment, every act of selfishness, every moment of conflict added to its robustness, making it more difficult to shift away from. It was a chilling realization to see how effortlessly we were building our own cages. But then, it also showed me the other side, glimpses of how love, empathy, and unity could strengthen the positive timeline. Every act of kindness, every moment of shared understanding, every step towards cooperation, built a pathway to a brighter future. The disturbing implication was clear. Humanity was actively creating its own potential downfall through its current trajectory, blind to the power of its own collective consciousness. We were sleepwalking towards a future we didn't want, simply because we didn't understand the power of our own minds and hearts. I realized the immense personal cost of this mission. My life, as I knew it, was over. I could never go back to being the grieving widower in his quiet home. I would be seen as crazy, delusional, or a fanatic by many, perhaps by everyone I knew. The alien had shown me a truth so profound, so paradigm-shattering, that it would be almost impossible for most people to accept. My grief for my wife, which had once consumed me, now had a new, terrifying dimension. It was no longer just about my loss. It was about a shared purpose, a continuation of her unspoken warnings, now amplified by an alien intelligence. I felt a profound sense of isolation, a loneliness that went beyond human understanding, because who could I talk to about this? Yet, despite that, an unwavering commitment solidified within me. I had to do this. I had to try. Then came the alien's final, most urgent telepathic message. It wasn't a command, but a clear, resonant call to action. I must act. I must share this truth, however difficult it would be, to awaken others to the choice before them. It wasn't about forcing belief, but about opening eyes, presenting the option. The method it conveyed wasn't through grand, sensational pronouncements, but through sharing my personal journey, my experiences, my newfound understanding. It had to be authentic, from the heart, a story that people could connect with, even if they couldn't grasp the full cosmic implications at first. I felt irrevocably changed, a messenger for a truth that could alter the course of human destiny. The weight was immense, but so was the purpose. My quiet life had ended, and something extraordinary, terrifying, and profoundly significant had begun. I was ready to speak. I wasn't just a grieving widower anymore. I was a man with a profound purpose, even if it felt terrifying. My physical appearance might have changed. Perhaps I looked a bit gaunt from the lack of sleep, but my eyes held a new intensity. There was a strange calm about me, despite the inner turmoil that constantly churned. My previous anxieties and the deep despair that had clouded my days were now replaced by a focused determination. It was like seeing the world through entirely new eyes, perceiving underlying energies and possibilities I had never noticed before. Everything felt connected, charged with a new significance. I knew I couldn't just shout my story from the rooftops. That would only lead to dismissal and ridicule. So, I started small, cautiously sharing snippets of my experience with a few trusted individuals. I tried to explain the dreams, the synchronicities, the feeling of being guided, and then, very carefully, the message about the calendar. The reactions were exactly what the alien had subtly prepared me for: disbelief, polite concern for my mental state, or just plain dismissal. My oldest friend, a pragmatic engineer, listened patiently, then suggested I might be processing my grief in unusual ways. My sister, bless her heart, offered to find me a good therapist. It was frustrating. A deep loneliness settling in as I realized the immense chasm between my reality and theirs. How could I convey something so utterly beyond their current understanding? Despite the skepticism, I started noticing subtle shifts in the collective human awareness around me. It wasn't anything obvious, but if you knew what to look for, it was there. There was a growing unease in society, a kind of low-level hum of anxiety that seemed to be escalating. More and more, I heard people talking about existential threats, climate change, geopolitical tensions, and even the future of humanity itself. There was also a noticeable increase in discussions about spirituality, consciousness, and even various conspiracy theories. While many of these theories were misguided, they all hinted at a collective search for deeper truths, a yearning for understanding beyond the mundane. I recognized these as echoes of the impending timeline divergence the alien had spoken of, a subconscious stirring within humanity, a collective intuition that something big was coming. Nature, too, continued to offer subtle confirmations. It was as if the world itself was aligning with my newfound understanding. I'd see specific birds, like the cardinal that had been my wife's favorite, appear at moments of doubt, almost as if delivering a message of encouragement. Unusual weather patterns, like a sudden, localized burst of light rain on a perfectly sunny day, would coincide with a moment of deep contemplation about the alien's words. And the night sky, when I bothered to look up, seemed to pulse with a greater intensity, the stars feeling closer, more alive. Then there were the dreams. My wife continued to appear, but now her presence was different. No longer filled with urgent warnings, her dreams were now filled with encouragement. She showed me glimpses of positive possibilities, visions of a future humanity could achieve if it made the right choices. These external and internal validations, these quiet affirmations, strengthened my belief in my mission. Even in the face of human skepticism, they were reminders that I wasn't crazy, that this was real, and that I had to keep going. The hardest part was deciding how to truly go public. I knew the direct, sensational claims would only alienate people further. If I stood on a street corner shouting about aliens and diverging timelines, I'd be locked up. No, I had to find a way to share my story that resonated on a deeper, more personal level, allowing people to draw their own conclusions without feeling preached to or threatened. It had to be authentic, a recounting of my personal journey, not an academic lecture. That's when the idea for a video started to form in my mind. Not a documentary, not a news report, but a personal narrative. I would tell my story from the beginning. The profound grief after losing my wife, the strange occurrences, the escalating synchronicities, the dreams, the numbers, and finally, the portal and the alien's message. I would present it as my experience, my truth, a cautionary tale woven into a personal journey of discovery. It would be an invitation, not a demand. The feeling of making this decision was profound, an irreversible step. I knew that once I shared this, there would be no turning back. My life would be irrevocably altered, exposed to public scrutiny and judgment. But the weight of the alien's message, the urgency of the 2030 convergence, outweighed any personal fear. I had been chosen for this, guided by forces beyond my comprehension, and I couldn't ignore it. I had to speak for my wife, for humanity, for the future we were all hurtling towards. The time for quiet contemplation was over. The time for sharing, however difficult, had begun. So here I am, sitting before you, putting everything out there. This isn't easy, believe me. I'm not doing this for fame or attention. I'm doing this because I have to. Because an entity from beyond our world, an alien, showed me a truth that I can no longer keep to myself. It's about the year 2030, and it's not what any of us think. It's not about the world ending in a fiery explosion or some dramatic cataclysm. It's far more subtle, and in some ways, far more disturbing. The alien told me that 2030 marks the end of a specific timeline, a construct of reality as we know it. It's a convergence point, a moment where humanity faces a profound choice. Imagine it like a road that forks. One path leads to a future of unity, understanding, and a higher state of consciousness. It's a path where we overcome our divisions, embrace empathy, and consciously create a harmonious world. The other path, well, that one leads to deeper division, escalating chaos, and a continued slide into a less desirable timeline, one marked by conflict, fear, and destruction. We are, right now, collectively choosing which road we will take. This isn't about some outside force dictating our destiny. It's about us, each one of us. The alien emphasized that while the choice is collective, it starts with the individual. Every thought we think, every word we speak, every action we take contributes to the larger energetic field that is shaping our future. Do we choose fear, anger, and blame? Or do we choose compassion, understanding, and love? It sounds simple, almost cliché, but the alien showed me that these seemingly small, personal choices have cosmic resonance. They are the threads that weave the tapestry of our collective reality. Our personal intentions, our daily interactions, they all feed into one of these two diverging timelines. If enough of us choose the path of unity, we can pull the collective consciousness onto that better road. If we continue on our current trajectory of division, the other path becomes our unavoidable reality. My own journey, from a broken man consumed by grief to someone carrying this unbelievable message, is a testament to how profoundly one can change. My wife's passing, the unbearable silence that followed, it all led me down this unexpected road. Her messages, first in dreams, then through synchronicities, were not just about her, but about something far greater. She was trying to prepare me, to guide me to this truth. I was lost, and then I found a purpose that transcends my individual pain. This transformation wasn't easy. It was terrifying, confusing, and often lonely. But it showed me that profound change and awakening are possible, even in the darkest of times, even when you feel utterly hopeless. If I can shift my entire perception of reality, then anyone can. The future, the alien made clear, is not fixed. It's not some predetermined fate written in stone. It is a living, breathing tapestry, constantly being woven by our collective consciousness. The year 2030 isn't a hard deadline for an apocalypse. It's a threshold. It's the point where the choices we are making right now, every single day, will solidify into a tangible reality. It's a moment of reckoning, not of judgment, but of consequence. The energy of this cosmic shift, this impending divergence, is palpable to me now. I feel it all around us, a constant hum beneath the surface of everyday life. It's like the universe is holding its breath, waiting for us to decide. So, I have to ask you, with all the seriousness I can muster, what path will you choose? What timeline will we collectively create? Will we continue down the road of division and fear? Or will we consciously choose the path of unity and understanding? This isn't just my story anymore. It's our story. It's humanity's story. This revelation, this choice, it's just the beginning. There are more layers to this truth, more insights to uncover, more ways we can consciously participate in shaping our future. I'm going to keep sharing what I learn, what I experience, what the lingering echoes of the alien's message continue to reveal. I invite you to join me on this journey, to explore these truths, and to consider the profound power we each hold to choose our collective destiny. Subscribe to this channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and let's explore this unfolding future together. The future isn't set, not yet. It's waiting for us to choose, us.